the constitution was debated for about 2 days. And the CA was unanimous. The president must derive his authority from the constitution, and his actions and decisions must be governed under the constitution. I compared what I already knew as a lawyer, governing under the constitution and governing by law. So you go to different. We prohibited the governments of Uganda, including President Museveni, ever to govern this country by law, but to govern it under the law. It's very, very important to know the difference. Governing a country under the law, the constitution, and governing a country by law. Please reflect on that and think about it very seriously, because the NRM, the way it has continued to govern the country ever since the coming into force of the 1995 constitution, it has abandoned the spirit of governing Uganda under the law, and has been governing by Uganda mainly by law, but many times contrary to the law. You are law students, very senior leaders of today and the future. I want you to mark my words. A country where the president and the cabinet believe and practice the idea that whatever we want, so long as we do it by law, we are doing right, is doomed to failure. But the government and the leadership which says we cannot do that because the constitution doesn't allow us, we must not follow this path because the constitution doesn't allow us. This one, Mr. Minister, don't do it because it is contrary to our laws. That government is for the people. It is a good government, and that is what the Constitution of Uganda of 1995 desired. But it has been abandoned. I don't know that my people are here, but I want them to give you a copy each. Give them a copy each, or give them. Because this is a test for all of you. So I'm going to tell you what happened. When this book came out, when I wrote it, and I wrote it in about 2 weeks only, I alerted the leader of the main opposition party, Senator Chakulani. I met him, he looked through and he said, this is a wonderful book. Then he said he's going to buy enough copies to give to every member of the opposition, independent. So he took 100 copies, paid them for himself, of presidential election, this book, challenging a presidential election by Kanyeihamba. He took them. Then I sent individual copies to some of his supporters and admirers, starting with the World Mayor of Kampala. I sent him a copy. I sent Chakulani's lawyer, I forget his name, but he works with him. the mayor. Yeah, I sent him a copy. Personally, they were handed these copies. Then I said, please respond to me what you think about my opinion. But what I wrote here is not an opinion. It is the actual law of Uganda. And one of the reasons I wanted you to see you, leaders of our future of our legal system, is to see what you are going to think about this bill. Article 104, headed Challenging Presidential Election, provided, one, that if you are dissatisfied with the results, you petition the Supreme Court. And it is clear here. The Supreme Court shall inquire, shall not hear, but shall inquire into the petition. Those are the words used in the law.
Look up his own affairs.
Inquire
You should advise his family.
into the petition. And then give its findings. Those are the very words used in the Constitution. And give its findings, not judgment. Now, ever since 2001, apart from very few judges, which include Kanyeihamba, Sekoko, Odero, and recently members of the Supreme Court, a few of them, judges have avoided those words. Uganda judges don't use the words we inquired into, as I said, as the Constitution directs. They said we heard. They don't say these are our findings. They say our judgment. I want you students who know, Ugandans, freeborn, ask any judges and your professors, why do they accept that in every petition we have had, starting with the 2001, the judges avoided the words used in Article 104, and they say, this is our judgment. Where do they get the word judgment from? If you read the 2006, what were our findings? And you either leaders and the lawyers, we were not. So from today, we are going to see what they do. If you read, I made sure in my findings 2006 that I educate everybody, including even my colleagues, the difference between hearing a case and inquiring into a petition. In my findings and the reasons, I distinguish between a judgment and a finding. I have told you that of those of us who were on the panel, Justice Sekoko, Justice Odero, Justice Kanyeihamba, we had carried out inquiries. I had inquired into the Kenya corruption. I gave him a report on which the current Kenya constitution is based, as Professor Mumba rightly pointed out. I was asked by the Chief Justice of Uganda to inquire into corruption and incompetence in the Uganda judiciary. I compiled a report, confidential report, gave it to him. For reasons known to him, said he leaked it to the public and collectively, rather defended those accused of corruption. I named 7 judges as possible candidates for investigation for corruption and abuse of office. 7. 3 of those were given to me, the names by the Chief Justice himself. But Kanyeihamba, confidential. I mentioned them on the evidence he himself gave me. Two of them he mentioned, I didn't have evidence on them before. It only came from him. One of them was a former judge. The other one was the judge of the High Court, and the other one was the judge of the Supreme Court. I didn't even know that part, how they looked like, the Supreme Court judge. But I named him on the instructions of the Chief Justice. What I said about that judge is published in the name of God, truth and justice, which I'm giving you. All that I wrote about that judge came not from anybody else, from the Chief Justice himself. As is usual in our country, people don't stand by their statement. So when the judge concerned complained, the impression given was I invented these stories. So I became the chief suspect as far as the judge was concerned. Not only that, but she went further and filed the case against me for defamation of character. Even though the report was confidential and it was disclosed from the Chief Justice, rather from the Chief Justice, nevertheless, I personally was sued. And the lawyers were pursuing the case until I disclosed that you are suing the wrong person. What I published was confidential on the advice of the Chief Justice. And he said I should never disclose anything. But he's the one who published it. So sue him. Because what exchange between me and him was strictly confidential and it was privileged. But by publishing and admitting publicly that it is his office which leaked the report, he's the one who is guilty. I think the judge must have been advised, you better drop the case against Kanyeihamba because it's never appeared again in the case. But nothing has happened. Nobody has investigated. Shouldn't it? This must be clear. Now we come to those named judges as corrupt in my report. I will not go into greater detail. But one of them was also named by the Chief Justice. Ben Odochi. Not Ben Odochi, rather, by Dr. Kanyeihamba publicly mentioned the same judge on his own evidence, not mine. He said Justice so and so is corrupt. He should be investigated and be removed.
from the judiciary. It was in the public. New Vision, other media mentioned it. We waited for the removal, or at least the discipline of that particular individual never came. That particular judge, for me, I didn't have anything judicial which said he was corrupt. But I knew him to have forged a thesis so that he can obtain PhD at Makerere. Makerere had asked me to be the supervisor. So I told everybody concerned that this is forged. Then when we discover he had also forged entry, he shouldn't have been a doctoral candidate there. This was confirmed by none other than the director of postgraduate studies at Makerere, then is it Katunguka, who is now Vice Chancellor. I have writing from saying this man is false. He's not admitted to do PhD. Katunguka, I have it in writing. Then the late Wendell, who was a scholar, wrote about this. This man should be dismissed. All that is written there in that book. So what happened? Katurele soldiers on. He retires as the Chief Justice. But not before, the judge he mentioned as corrupt, himself, Chief Justice, is transferred to an up-country station. He's there. He's still a judge. All the others I named on evidence given to me by judges, lawyers, and the members of the public, and I mentioned all the wrongs they committed with documented evidence. None has ever been challenged or removed. On the contrary, several of them have been promoted. Really. And you raise the matter. It becomes headline tomorrow. After 1 week, everything is forgotten. It is my road, my wife. What kind of country are we running? In other countries, the reason I called you, revolutions, I'm not saying overthrow the government or assassinate them, but ideas of change happened in Korea, happened in various other countries, including America, is led by younger people, by student leaders. When America was in war in Vietnam, it is the university students who led the move for America to move out of that country. And what did it? The revolution that we knew about Greece was led by intellectuals from universities. What has happened to the intellectuals in Uganda? At one time, I was very pleased that a number of your professors, namely Prof Kanyeihamba, Joe, somebody he used to be a dean also, I think he retired now. They challenged the government of that day on some constitutional matter. And I was happy that these are intellectuals who want our country to be governed well. But since then, they have kept quiet. Some have retired quietly. One of the people who reviewed my book was Joe Orokwa Onyango. I have been recruited by his father. Onyango used to be his chief registrar at Makerere University when I came in as a young lecturer, and he's the one who recruited me, very brilliant administrator. Then his son, I gathered, became professor of law at Makerere and was heading human rights, actually. Many times I shared his platform with him, including the one when we addressed members of parliament. And he was the discussant of my paper. And they asked me a question about the term limits in our constitution. And I quote, he said, in their wisdom, the founders of the Uganda constitution said the president should hold office for 2 terms of 5 years each. After 5 years, he's still fumbling about and sowing the roots of his policy, which can be achieved in the next 5 years. So it is proper that they should have 2 terms. That is sufficient for any individual to achieve what they want. And he even went further that the greatest leaders of the world have only lived for a short life, or governed for a short life. Jesus Christ, 3 years in administration. Nelson Mandela, 1 term. Ganges, short term. But what they achieved is forever. So you don't need more than 10 years to create an impression on your country. Oroka Onyango went further. He said, after 10 years, if you stay for another term, then you start showing diminished returns. Your government becomes sluggish, becomes repetitive, and you don't produce. After another 10 years, you are negative to your country. If you should stay longer than that, like Museveni has done, you become a liability to a nation. Museveni and the kind of leadership we have today is a liability to Uganda. How can younger people see it? I have been arrested here twice, taken in the same house, so that I don't say this. I respect Museveni and the government. I worked for him. But it's one thing he doesn't like. I have never and I will never fear him. I respect him. I accept him as the leader which you people in Ghana have put in place. But he has messed up the administration of this country. Let me give 2 instances. Today, if you read that newspaper, they say the first lady, especially Monitor, is slavery from saying the first lady has done this, the first lady. But I can show you a letter she wrote to me with her signature, thanking me for not calling her first lady. For me, I have never called Janet Museveni first lady. But she's achieved a lot. as chairman of the orphans, these women say, as Minister of Karamoja, she did quite well. And when I was Chancellor of Kampala International University, she came as our chief guest. She was then the Minister of Karamoja. And I addressed her, First Lady, we're happy to see the First Lady here. Everybody, including Masaja Baraba, the chairman of the Board of Trustees, First Lady is our guest of honor. Then he raised me to speak as Chancellor. So I told him that I was very pleased to notice that our chief guest was none other than Mrs. Janet Museveni, Honorable, because she was then an MP, Honorable Janet Museveni, the Minister of Karamoja. Then I said, the reason I call her Honorable and not First Lady is that when you say First Lady, you are implying that everything she does, what she has achieved, is because she sleeps with the president. Because she's the wife of the president, that's why she's the Minister of Education. She's the wife of the president. That's why she achieved what she achieved as the president of the, I forget what they call them, often say. So everybody else who knew loved me, they loved. And the Masaja Malaba stood up and said, Professor, you are very intelligent. Because she achieves what she in her own right as missing, what used to be Miss Kataha. And then not because she sleeps in the president's bed. Everybody people say, First Lady, First Lady. You are talking about she's the mistress of the head of state, mistress of the head of state. Therefore, that's why she's doing what she's doing. I even talked to the editors of New Vision, but they continue calling her First Lady. They don't seem to listen to us. Masaja Baraba and I, Masaja Baraba is a friend of the first family. Praised him. But more important, I have a note from Janet saying, Professor, thank you very much for recognizing me in my own right. And not as the right of the president. What the Ugandans have forgotten is that President Museveni, under the establishment of the NRM, did not want her to stand as a member of parliament. If you recall, she defied them. She even defied her husband, saying she had been called by God. Why do we guys have short memories? So when we were in the cabinet, the first two cabinet meetings, someone suggested, or rather called his wife First Lady. And the President Museveni complained. He said, why do you call my wife First Lady? Has she got anything that other women don't get? Secondly, why do you want to copy foreigners? The term First Lady is Americanism. They call the wife of the president First Lady. Why do you want us to copy Americanism? That was President Museveni himself. He knows today that he doesn't complain. But when we first were in the cabinet, he complained that we should not call his wife First Lady. Seems today, if you don't call her First Lady, some people are not pleased. Which one do we do? I want to ask Mrs. Museveni, Janet Museveni, do I continue calling you Honorable? Or Janet? Well, now, our new culture is, I should call you First Lady. And why do you accept to be called First Lady when you told me personally that you prefer to be called Honorable instead of First Lady? If she can answer that question, we have a lady here. Maybe you can put the question to her. Then you shall know where we are going. Why is it that we're contradicting ourselves every time? Going back to this, I have put the law before you. You were young or you hadn't been born when this happened. But what happened was that after Odochi and his team had traveled the lengths and the breadths of the whole country, and they had also gone to other countries, including South Africa, UK, Germany, and Ghana, they came up with the ideas of what our people want the constitution to be. And the two fundamental principles were established. One was that the government should be under the law, could only exercise the powers given to him by Parliament, whether by the Constitution, and everything else that this country does should be authorized or enabled under the Constitution. That is a very fundamental principle established as a result of Odochi and his colleagues going around to find evidence. Number two was that the president or the government could do nothing valid or legal unless authorized by the Constitution. I wanted to stop there. I told you that when I retired as a judge, I was impaneled by lawyers and the litigants to challenge the reappointment of Ben Sekoko as Chief Justice after he had retired. I led the team of lawyers as senior counsel because I had resumed practice. We challenged him. We made across statements by some judges, particularly Kahuma, then in the Court of Appeal, saying for him, the president can do no wrong. But according to him, his understanding, the Constitution saying as long as President Museveni is president of Uganda, he can never commit an offense. And therefore, you can never find in his life to say Museveni was wrong when he's still president. A matter that was also argued and sustained in Sudan until the Sudanese man was caught by international law, arrested, and is now charged with crimes against humanity. One day, we in Uganda shall face international law. We can't avoid it. One of the reasons given by sympathizers with Museveni is that he refuses to resign now or to relinquish power because he fears that he may be charged before international court for crimes against humanity. I don't know what, I don't have any evidence that Museveni has committed any of that, although certainly many of his security people have, some of his ministers have, but he personally, it's difficult to know whether which of them he has committed. Having said that, some of us were strong supporters of President Museveni. People like Nagenda of New Vision. People like Kanyeihamba had been freedom fighters. General Muntu, the late Visaso, I think he was the general also. And many others, Kanya, Matembe. The list is endless, Buzindana. We are all from the cradle of the NRM. And we are all supporting President Museveni and his leadership until he changed his behavior, character, and actions. So if Ugandans are intelligent, and you students and the leaders of the law schools are among the most intelligent in this country, have you ever asked, why is it that his formidable opponent, including Kanyeihamba, his former supporters and the cabinet ministers and the colleagues, he doesn't admit it, but I am the one of the founders of the principles of the movement. I first met Museveni with younger Kategaya in Arusha. No, not in Arusha, in Lusaka, Zambia. He was from the bush in Mozambique. We met there, and we founded the first ever Uganda Liberation Front, led by then Prince Balije of Wankoli. We had the people like Tilelondwa as one of our members from UPC when Obote was in exile and Amini was still in power. And since then, this man here, you see, I have been author or co-author of every constitutional document that Uganda has ever had, emanating from liberation fronts, like Paranosa, the Moshi Conference. I authored its constitution. When we met in Nairobi, I said to him, first of all, before Moshi, the late Andrew Kaira and I, we were the main brains behind the Moshi meeting. Nyereri's people, particularly Mkapa, and the ambassador in London, they were collaborating with us. I have in my book how Kaira and I escaped death at Namanga in Kenya. It's part of the memory. But the Ugandans, you don't remember anything. The death of Andrew Kaira, just not very far from here, remains a mystery. Many people know how he died and why. Others have the wrong idea, including the theory that there may have been a robbery. Many other people know otherwise, but it remains there. what is wrong with this country? This last election, 2021, gave you an indication that the system we have today can be defeated and will be defeated. I had a thought that having done dismally bad in Uganda, the NRM party did not get even one seat in the parliament for Uganda. At the same time, Uganda was the fertile ground from which the NRM defeated Amin and Otism, and it was from Wales in Uganda where they managed to win power in this country. How do you turn back and despise the hand that fed you? I've been here since NRM came into power. I was part of it. And slowly, we have misunderstood the structure of Uganda. I wrote in 1975 my first book, Constitution Rule the Government in Uganda, that any Ugandan politician who belittles the role of Uganda, who does not take into account the aspirations of Baganda as a community, can never succeed to rule Uganda peacefully. I have repeated that many times. And you can't. The attack on Mayoland by President Museveni shows you that he's totally out of touch with the reality of what is happening in Uganda. As we speak now, where we are now, we are on Mayoland. The land on this hill belongs to the office of the Saba Sergeant, personally. I am not the only one here. Opposite me. There is Museveni's son-in-law and his wife. The daughter is called Patience, and Waboko is son-in-law. They are my next door. Just that house you see there. That is their house, and have built even a bigger mansion there. Okay, fine. But it is that you I think about 200 yards is the house of the Queen Mother of Toro, Kemiksa. She's a friend of mine. And her son, the King of Toro, often stays there. The recent death of General Pecos, Tessa, his house was below here. General Salem Saleh, the relative of Museveni, is up here. Who else is up here? Professor Mamdani, Professor of Makerere, renowned intellectual. Also up here, there is the widow of my former friend and the daughter of one of the founders of the movement intellectually called Bishop Festo Kibenje. His daughter lives up there. Some years ago, one of the strongest Bush war general, I will not mention his name, took me on a trip to his ranch as you go towards Mukono. He's got cows there and other animals. He's a very strong supporter of the president. Amanda Mushega, whom we dismissed after he opposed removal of term limits, also took me as we go to Masaka in a bush there, and he said, "This is my land." He didn't have much there. So when his minister, what is his name? He's fighting Mairo. You are not just fighting Baganda or Uganda. You are not just fighting. You are fighting all the tribes. You are fighting everybody in Uganda. Article 29 of our constitution says, Ugandans, you are free to live, work anywhere you want in Uganda. You can find a home anywhere. Then we said in the constitution, not just Uganda or Ankole or Acholi or Soga, but we said the land in Uganda belongs to the people. Citizens, not people, the citizens of Uganda. So long as I am a citizen of Uganda, I can settle in Kigezi, I can settle in Kisoro, I can settle in Wales. These people who say this is our tribal land are doing it against the constitution. Because a Ugandan can settle anywhere. I'm going to settle here, I'm settled here. This land, which belongs to the Kabaka, and Musaji Kabaka according to the Buganda custom, but he can't come and say, Kanyeihamba, go away. I've told you my neighbors are known Baganda. In fact, we are on Kabaka's land, but my feelings is the majority of the people who live on this land are other Ugandans, and not Baganda. So by fighting the idea of Maryland, the president doesn't know, but he's fighting the whole of Uganda. But that is, to me, is not very important. That we have a president who tells lies and he knows he's telling lies. Once you people, you know this is the leader of Uganda, but that leader tells lies deliberately, then you must think very seriously. Are we being led properly? What do I mean by that? You know what happened in the general elections of this year, 2021. One of the candidates, Sentamu Chapulani, was hunted down as a man. You saw army, the police, letting him and wanting to shoot him if people came to listen to him. There's one side of picture where they showed the army and the police fully armed, waiting for people to come and they listen to him, then they can shoot them. Since the NRM primary election, we have lost many people dying through conflict, army shootings, the police become brutal. Then our president says the army is the most corrupt institution in Uganda. These are the very words of President Museveni. It is the most corrupt. What has he done about it? Have you seen him dismiss even one policeman? No. The man who was put in charge of the police, Major General KIU Makerere, has a bad record. People will tell you he's corrupt. People tell you he's got so many dates. The other day he was in newspapers quarreling with Wananchi. If you remember, one time Museveni abandoned him and supported his opponent. And when KIU Makerere lost, KIU Makerere cast Museveni. And for some reason, KIU Makerere seemed to have a hold on President Museveni. So he always keeps him in the government, even when he's defeated. But I don't mind him being any other. But how do you make him the Minister of Internal Affairs in charge of the police? Knowing the police, you have said to the country, is the most corrupt institution. And then I go back. I sent him a copy of my report showing who was corruptible, and so forth. He's never done anything. I sent him a copy on the request of Byamukama, who is the chairman, the chairman of the Judicial Service Commission. I sent him a copy. He acknowledged receipt of the copy. They said they were going to investigate the judges I named. They never did. But last year, some official in the Judicial Service Commission sent me a letter on each of them saying, clear. All of them were clear, including the judge who was named as a salary corrupt by the Chief Justice, Katule. He was also clear. But nobody tells you who cleared it. But I have that letter here. I called the police, rather the press, to say I have all this evidence. You publish it. They will never publish it. They have refused to publish it. At the moment, we don't have a judiciary you can trust. The police and the army are now agents of the executive, pure and simple, and all are contrary to what the Constitution provides. If you look at the Constitution, under the chapter saying UPDF, members of the UPDF are supposed to be nationalistic, patriotic, and subordinate to civil authorities. That has gone by the wayside. So finally, before lunch it is ready, if you read this book and have sent a copy to Museveni, I am appealing to Museveni, our president, that as early as possible. Paragraph A of subsection 6 of paragraph 59 of the Presidential Election Act. Because that paragraph is illegal, it is unconstitutional, and it is the only one that justifies judges to say the winner of the election was properly elected. And yet it is unconstitutional. And I said so in 2006. Then I invited that future judges, future Supreme Court, should revisit this matter and change the law. They have never done so. I have sent a copy to the Chief Justice. I have sent a copy to the Deputy Chief Justice. And the point I was making about Odochi, I will also make about the Deputy Chief Justice, who is a friend of mine. I don't call him Deputy Chief Justice. Why? Because the Judicial Service Commission said they never had an opportunity to make a recommendation about Justice Richard Abutiel, whom now you regard as Deputy Chief Justice. Our constitution is clear. For anybody to be appointed a judge of the courts of record, certainly to be elected, appointed Chief Justice or Deputy Chief Justice, you must first be recommended by the Judicial Service Commission. It's clear there. Article 145, 45 onwards. But we are told that Butera, who's been a friend of mine, we were very close when he was DPP, was not nominated by the Judicial Service Commission. After Odoro was nominated and approved, the president simply said, I also appoint Butera, the Deputy Prime Minister. My first criticism is to those who are not qualified, who have not been recommended by the Judicial Service Commission. They are lawyers, and yet they accept. I asked Justice Ben Odochi. He knew he had to retire at the age of 70. He's the one who recommended the draft constitution. Now, what? Today you retire. Tomorrow Museveni comes to you and says, I want you to remain Chief Justice. If you are a Uganda, what's your name? Can't you tell him I'm not qualified? Do you keep quiet? And you accept to be appointed again when you are in retirement. So my first question is that one, benefit. But now we come to the Chief Justice. And I want you to ask this as well in the public. If Richard Butera was recommended by the Judicial Service Commission, I have no problem. And I will apologize to him. But if it is true that he was not recommended by the Judicial Service Commission, and the President simply said, by the powers entrusted in me, I appoint you, without that step, then nobody should recognize Richard Butera as Deputy Chief Justice. And as we talk now, I hope there is a friend among you. Ask him and tell him, you call Kanyeihamba. But if Kanyeihamba is wrong, you are recommended by the Judicial Service Commission, he withdraws everything and I will apologize publicly. But if you didn't, I stand by my criticism. So we shall leave it at that. So I have given you a number of jobs to do before lunch. One is to tell our members of parliament, the opposition, but even NRM, ask me NRM, including Otafide, to read this book and to say, do you agree with Kanyeihamba or not? And if you agree with him, if he's right, then you should delete paragraph A of subsection 6 of section 59 of the Presidential Election Act. Because it is unconstitutional, it is illegal. Let's have lunch. This is what has happened. They kept silent. What happened to Tinyefusa? It was a firebrand. I seen with somebody with cold water on the fire. He no longer speaks. kept quiet. This woman who is now IGG, I don't know how, Kanye was the president of the Federation Party. He invited me to address the party as attorney general. I said, you can't found a party called Federal Party. Federal is a system. So you call the NRM, call DP to become part of this federal system. Why can't it be a party? And she said, Kanyeihamba, you are the one who is at the fault. You drafted our constitution and they gave President Museveni many powers which he shouldn't have. You are the one who created a dictatorship. Within a month, you are saying Museveni is the savior of Uganda. You should leave him forever because he made high minister. That is Uganda. Yes, I